Welcome to today's webinar, Better Together, Why EDR Without MTD Leaves You Vulnerable to Attack. My name is Monique Vicente, and I'm the Mobile Endpoint Marketing Product Marketing Manager here at Zimperium, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I want to introduce all of our speakers who have joined us today. We have JT Keating, our SVP of Product Strategy. Hello, JT.
Good morning, Monique. Great to be here and looking forward to chatting and listening to the expertise of my other co-presenter, which will be a lot of fun.
Awesome. We have Rick Bosworth, Director of Product Marketing at SentinelOne. Thanks for being here today, Rick.
My pleasure, Monique, and JT, right back at you. Looking forward to the shared learning and opportunity to speak about EDR and protecting the global enterprise.
Awesome. Here's what we have planned for today's session. We're going to talk about the mobile threat landscape, why MTD and EDR are better together, and then we'll give you a little demo today. So next, just some quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please submit them via the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer those as we go. Any questions that might require some research, or if we run out of time, we'll follow up with you after the session and get you the answers. Let's dive right in.
Excellent.
Awesome. So JT, let's level set a little bit for our audience. What are some of the recent mobile threats that have made the headlines?
Yeah, thank you, Monique. Folks, the way I look at this, I'm old. I've been doing cybersecurity for 20 some odd years. And it's really simple if you really think about it. You only need to protect, let's say, an endpoint if two things are happening simultaneously. If there's something of value that are on those endpoints, because if there isn't anything of value, you don't need to protect it unless it's, by the way, something of value could be apps, it could be access to the network, et cetera. And are they actually under attack, right? So in mobile, they clearly have value. They're being used for MFA, they're being used for apps, which we're going to talk about here in a second, and even access into various different resources on the network. So there's value. What about the threat side? So we just have a few slides to kind of bring this up to speed on it. And of course, you can hit our website, you can hit SentinelOne's website and see more things about this from a blog standpoint. But this is just a recent smattering of a few things here. Everyone remembers the Twilio and Cloudflare phishing attacks that were occurring and dealing with MFA. Pegasus, everybody knows about Pegasus. A lot of people think about the fact that, okay, now the NSO group is having difficulties and being taken care of. The reality is Pegasus, we all know Pegasus because of the NSO group and because it became a very publicly well-known scenario. Even last year, we saw multiple cases with the same abilities as Pegasus, but actually being delivered via pretty much open source code. So nobody really knows exactly who the attackers are behind it or the providers of the software, unlike being able to just easily target NSO. So I would caution people to not just think about Pegasus as it's, as a unicorn, pseudo pun intended. And then we have things like the WhatsApps, flytrap, malware, et cetera, along those lines. And then the one down in the corner, I think is kind of important, not for the specific, but when you actually dive into it, which we're going to talk about on the next slide, the fact that Apple and Google have been putting out record number of security patches for mobile. Again, you don't need to push out patches unless there's something you need to patch against. So these are all things that just kind of reinforce, just from a headline standpoint, what's going on. So Monique, if we could hit the next slide, please. This slide is a bit of an eye chart, but for fun. This is data that all comes from our global mobile threat report that we put out last year. We're in the process of doing the new one, so pay attention here in a couple months, and we'll be having a brand new one, reset, et cetera. But here are some of the things that I think are very important. Starting on the left-hand side, the third one down, 60% of endpoints accessing the enterprise today are mobile. That means that traditional EPP EDR, which Rick is going to talk about, we're going to talk about the vision of SentinelOne, is covering about half the endpoints. Okay. So by definition, okay, we got to worry about that. Now you come up to the 10%. 10% is related to what I was talking about a minute ago, which is there are business apps, productivity apps on these mobile devices that therefore the attackers want to get to them. So if 10%, on average, there was about 90 apps on a typical mobile device, which means somewhere between 9 and 10 are actual productivity apps. The flip side is that means you also have about 80% of the apps that are on a mobile device that is accessing corporate data that are not business apps. Within those, there's huge sets of vulnerabilities and risks and dangers. So part of what you need to protect against is not only attacks like malicious apps, but also risky apps. And so if you look down in the 81% number, for instance, right down there in the corner, you can see that what that's talking about is the fact that a lot of these, we just use financial as an example, that the financial apps have these vulnerabilities within them. So that's an example of, you got an app, maybe you have a banking app sitting on a device that's vulnerable, that can be exploited, that can then therefore impact the business side of things. As a result of that, you can see the 42%, right? 42% of these organizations have said in their, self-surveyed and their own data, the fact that they experienced some form of a breach that stemmed from mobile devices. If you come to the middle, 466%, that's the increase in actually exploited 0-day vulnerabilities on mobile in 2021 when the data came from. So a huge increase in that. And of the known exploitable vulnerabilities in that year, 1/3 of them were on mobile. So again, it just shows there's value and these things are being targeted. The 5,000 is 5,000 unique samples of malware discovered every day that year. That number will go up in our next report. The next slide, please, Monique.
Hey, JT, could I jump in here and just
please.
on what you're saying? Fundamentally at SentinelOne, we just think of mobile as another endpoint. It's a way that, where is the perimeter? It's disappeared. Employees work from wherever, whenever they can be productive. And the mobile endpoint is one way of accessing those resources. Nobody cares about my pictures on my phone. I'm not a celebrity, but threat actors, if they phish me, and you're going to go in right here, they can get my credentials and then they can get in and start moving about my network. So it's an attack surface that, if it's left unprotected, can be a viable means of entry. And quite frankly, these threat actors are just opportunistic, path of least resistance.
Rick, that's a great point. And philosophically, for the folks on listening, that's part of the reason why we're such great partners with SentinelOne, in terms of, we both see an endpoint as an endpoint as an endpoint. For instance, if you have patient data sitting on a tablet, is that any different than patient data sitting on a laptop? It's not. It's just not, right?
It's data.
Yeah,
that has to be protected.
Exactly. And then mobile does bring a couple things that are unique. One is, mobile is usually the thing being used for MFA. So even if you kind of, say to yourself, oh, we don't have any business apps on there, which is probably not true because people are reading their email and, everything else, right? If that is where you're delivering the token, and if somebody has compromised that device and they can take that token, they can log in anywhere, like what Rick was talking about. So that's one thing that's different. The other thing that's different is, as Rick was just talking about, phishing, right? The vast majority of all corporate anti-phishing solutions, and I still think this is amazing. This is not a critique at all, but we continue talking about the fact that 90+% of breaches start with some sort of a phishing attack. And yet, everybody's deployed corporate anti-phishing solutions, right? So it's like, it still shows that humans in the loop are always going to be a problem. But all those corporate anti-phishing solutions are actually in line of corporate email. When was the last time you remember getting a phishing email? And when was the last time you remember getting a phishing text or a phishing message? When was the last time you scanned a QR code and actually knew for absolute certain that it was what it was designed to be? here in Dallas, we actually ended up with a situation a little while back where some enterprising folks put fake QR codes on the parking meters, and everybody was paying them. And the only reason that it ended up folding is because everybody's cars got towed. And they're like, I already paid for this, So the SMS messenger QR code type stuff, there's no protection for it in terms of traditional. And this is just talking about the fact that the bad guys, to Rick's point, they know this. So they're producing mobile phishing attacks that are optimized for phishing. For mobile. And so some of them, for instance, don't even run. They'll give you like a 404 error if you hit it on a traditional endpoint. So they're even getting closer and closer and honing in because they know it's such an effective solution. And it doesn't even have to be that you give your credentials up. Once you click on it, you're hitting that website. That website can deliver malicious code directly to you. So it's a combination of things. And then to finish out the threat side, and then we'll get to kind of the solution side, talking about malware, I mentioned the next slide, please, Monique. The 5,000 new samples discovered each day during 2022. I said 21 earlier, but 2022. That number is roughly 2 million. That basically, it's a lot, and it shows that it is constantly being produced because, as Rick was talking about, that's because the bad guys know there's things of value. They know there's unprotected endpoints, spending all this time outside the perimeter, whatever that is these days, but then accessing corporate resources. So that's why they're going there. So that's kind of the threat side of things. I'm going to share two pieces of data on the engine side of detecting these sorts of things, specifically around malware. And then we'll pivot back over to the EDR and how do you combine all this stuff into one place. So Monique, if you wouldn't mind, the next slide, please. So one of the things that most of the people on the call are very familiar with, testing organizations like AV Test, right? Zimperium, our engine helps power SentinelOne Singularity Mobile as well, right? Which is why we're having this conversation, because this is where the worlds come together. Our engine is called Z9. Our advantage in the market is that we do the vast majority of all of our detection on the device. And part of that is if the bad guy owns the network, he cuts off access to cloud-based detection. So we wanted to be able to protect ourselves. There's all sorts of other benefits that come with doing on-device detection. You can operate the console on any cloud, not just locked into one. You can do on-prem, all these other advantages, right? Privacy, huge advantage. But one of the things we always want to do is it's machine learning detection of not only known, but unknown. So how well does it work when it's offline? How well does it work when it's online? You can see this really nice glowing report, and you can actually get a copy of the report if you'd like off our website. But Monique, if you can go to the next slide just to wrap this part of the conversation up. Oh, I guess we lost the slide there. Or did you go back one?
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that.
This is basically on the left. They had a sample basically of like really well-known huge corpus of malware. And they tested it online, and then they tested it when it was offline. And you can see that there really was almost no drop whatsoever, statistically speaking, against this sample. So again, literally just cut off all access and just run it, right? And then the one on the right, I think, is even more important for enterprises, especially as Rick was talking about with enterprises, corporate value and everything. This is when they had a bunch of real-time stuff that nobody's ever seen. It's not in any of the Virus Total or any of those sorts of repositories. So totally brand new malware. And they ran it again in two different scenarios. And you can see that the engine itself, against that growing sample of 5,000 a day of unique samples of malware, including, as I was talking about, the Pegasus-like sort of attacks, the engine works, right? So then, Monique, if we can pivot over and we say, okay, now we've talked about 60% of the endpoints accessing the enterprise have corporate data on them. They are under attack from all these things that we're talking about. How do we, Monique, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. There we go. How do we blend this all together? And Rick mentioned, that from SentinelOne's standpoint, and same with ours philosophically, an endpoint's an endpoint. So, but somebody needs to pull these things together. This is the new diagram from Gartner, the Gartner Market Guide for Mobile Threat Defense, which both SentinelOne and Zimperium are named as vendors within. And this is part of their XDR kind of vision. What I think is cool is this is their XDR vision, but this is exactly what SentinelOne has.
Right.
So, Rick, can you kind of make your comments and thoughts about this, and then explain the real world combination of mobile and traditional endpoints with Singularity in terms of what's actually available today, not just a concept.
Yeah, sure. This isn't, some XDR, at least from Singularity perspective. Singularity XDR is the platform that does the data normalization and correlation automatically of related attack events and assembles that attack sequence and visualizes it automatically. What we're doing is we're taking telemetry from either native sources, whether those are mobile user endpoints, server, virtual machines, cloud workloads, or identity, as well as third-party data sources via our Singularity Marketplace. And we're ingesting that data into the Singularity XDR platform. Why? So that the SOC, the security analyst, can have visibility of the threat actors' movements throughout the enterprise. We're not just looking at with blinders in the user endpoint. We're actually seeing JT launch an attack on Rick's iOS device. And from there, they move up to an Active Directory server, start moving about and looking for AD groups. And they're finding cloud workloads. And you can see the attacker moving around doing discovery. And we can begin to surface, using our behavioral AI, indicators of compromise, and automatically bring all that together and present it to the SOC and say, look, here is what is happening in your network. So it's news the SOC can use, if you will. See, protect, respond.
That's great.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so I may have gotten a little bit ahead of myself here, but that's fundamentally not only the vision, but actually the present day reality that SentinelOne is delivering with our XDR platform, the Singularity XDR platform. We have those native attack surfaces that we support, cloud workloads, endpoint, which includes mobile endpoints, as well as identity. I mentioned those AD servers. So we have we're an open XDR so that we can ingest from third-party resources or data sources via the Singularity Marketplace. Ultimately, we want to be able to see the attacker, protect the enterprise footprint, and then respond and resolve to these attacks at machine speed in real time. Ingesting data from a wide variety of sources. It's customizable, hierarchy, multi-tenant, with role-based access control. It's highly scalable, trusted by some of the largest enterprises across the globe who are leaders in their space. And increasingly, we are seeing a desire for these enterprise customers, these global titans. They recognize the threat that the unmitigated attack surface that mobile presents to their enterprise. So increasingly, we see this as part of not only RFPs, but also the quotes that they're requesting from us. Let's go to the next slide, please. Just another visualization. I won't belabor the point. I think I've made it several times. An endpoint is an endpoint is an endpoint. So whether we're talking about Monique's Mac OS laptop, JT's Dell workstation, or my iOS device, mobile. A mobile device is an endpoint and is worthy of protection. And that is where mobile threat defense comes in. Because, one of the conversations that we usually have with prospects who are not as familiar with mobile threat defense. And we've even seen this evolve as recently over the last year, a growing awareness of the differentiation of mobile threat defense from, say, mobile device management. Management is management, and threat defense is security, and there the two shall meet. Management is kind of like a handyman, does a lot of things, but security doesn't, they don't do it well. If I have a hardcore plumbing problem with my house, I'm not going to call a handyman, I'm going to call a plumber. And you can look at the MITRE Ingenuity attack framework mobile framework, I should say, and they'll show you the differences between MTD and MDM. Let's go to the next slide.
Sure.
JT, I'm talking a lot. Any thoughts you want to jump in there? Respond to?
Yeah, I was thinking about your comment about the management side of things, and you're absolutely right. Matter of fact, the same market guide from Gartner, which again you can get off our website, they have a diagram, an updated diagram of the difference between what you get with a UEM/MDM, right, mobile device management side of things, and mobile threat defense. And the management components are the management components. It's really, policy control, that sort of thing. All of the active threat detection and protection side of it comes from the MTD piece of the equation. The other thing we've seen with a lot of our customers is there is a significant movement away from managed devices, and not just for BYOD. They're going towards more, dare I say, zero trust, conditional access, conditional launch type stuff. So even the management component is kind of slipping away, but you need that active information. And then the other thing that I think about when it comes to, Ricky, you guys and your vision around XDR and your execution on it, I think it's going to be fun to see, as you're really smart scientists dive into this, how you start really, when I think about XDR, I'm like, okay, and you guys are doing it. A lot of people are talking about it. You guys are doing it. Is the ability to go, okay, my mobile device using MTD, Singularity Mobile, has flagged that Rick is on a fake Wi-Fi, a rogue access point. The bad guy owns the network that Rick is on.
Yep.
Today, you can take direct action and go, okay, so now we're going to kill that network. The different things that we can do, kill the network on the phone, right? Going forward with the XDR side of things, you're going to detect that, hey, Rick's phone is on a bad Wi-Fi. Where's Rick's laptop? And so even though Rick's laptop doesn't have the threat defense detection of bad Wi-Fi, for instance, obviously it has the anti-malware and everything like that, then it's like, okay, take a different action. His laptop is on the same network. Maybe you take a different action, So I think as you guys start going further into XDR, those sorts of things are going to be really cool to see. Absolutely. How it's like a self-defending around Rick, not just Rick's devices.
What I love about that, JT, and just for our audience, this is all authentic and unscripted. JT and I haven't discussed this. What I love about that, that's a crystal clear example of a use case for XDR. Mm-hmm. My iOS device is threatened. It's on a rogue access point. Where's my laptop? That's perfect. That's news that the SOC can use, and that's a very logical next step. So what we're showing here is a screen cap of our XDR platform as the SOC would see it. In the upper left, you see a green arrow. That means the threat has been mitigated, so all good. They probably had this set to protect mode. But you can see on the mobile threat enrichment here, and I've highlighted it for you, that a user tapped a phishing link and then visited that link. And interestingly, I mentioned earlier, we're seeing increased adoption, rapid acceleration around the globe around MTD, especially for global enterprises, but also at mid-market commercial. So we have a growing list of data pool to anonymize and pull from. We see increasingly that where organizational policy allows the user to proceed to a phishing site, more often than not, they do so despite having been alerted to the fact that this is a phishing site. So I thought that was amazing. So SOC people out there, just be aware that the threat that the mobile attack surface represents. I'm not here to spread fear, uncertainty, or doubt, but I just go where the data leads me. That's all. And that's
Rick, I can provide a comment on where the data leads us. If you look at the global mobile threat report from last year, one of the stats in there is visited a malicious website, and 12.5% of the devices somebody visited a malicious website. That means in like 99% of the cases, they were phished. They were warned about a link, but they went anyway, right? Because like if you think about like what percentage of people were exposed to mobile phishing attacks last year? 100%.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that name a person that hasn't gotten their DHL, their Amazon, their PayPal, like whatever, right?
Bank.
So we, from our privacy model, we're not reading people's stuff, right? If somebody has a link, we assess the link, and then we will say, hey, you shouldn't go here. But quite often people do. So to your point, Rick, I mean, 12.5% of the people still with warnings, because we have warnings. So people that don't even have warnings, the number's got to be significantly higher that go. So it just reinforces your point.
Yep. Good call out there. Love it. I would dare say 100% of the people that click a link and aren't warned go to the link that they want to go to. Sorry, little tech humor there. Next slide, please. All right, and so just teeing this up before Monique presses click, we have a 1 minute. It's okay. 1 minute demo video for you.
Oh, there we go. Pause.
But Monique's learning about GPT. Awesome.
All right, are we ready, or do you want to tee it up?
1 minute demo where the dulcet tones of one of our SEs, Joe Pointer, is going to show you how Singularity Mobile Threat Defense detects a phishing attack in real time. Yeah, we have a little bit of a problem with the audio, but
it's okay. This is the console that actually shows the various different threat logs. So you can see probably on the left-hand side, it'll start to go through the motion, I would assume.
Yeah, he's teeing it up right now saying, hey, on his mobile device where he has personal email and work email, he received an email from a trusted friend and said, hey, you need to check this out. All right, so what do when you receive something from a friend? You click it. Oh, and right there, the link is risky. So I think right here, he's going to go back to safety. That's good. But, and so over here on the right, what we have is the threat log right there within the Singularity XDR console showing that Joe clicked on a phishing link. And you see the details, the suspect URL, his physical location, where he was when he clicked that link, and various other statistics. And that's it. A very simple demo. The key point is that Singularity Mobile Threat Defense is native, local, and autonomous. It's an agent that sits right on your mobile device. Here I'm showing mine. I've been a SentinelOne employee for 2.5+ years, but I've had SentinelOne Mobile Threat Defense protecting my mobile device for maybe a 1.5 years, and I love it. It automatically shows me when I hop off a plane and I get on a suspect's Wi-Fi network, or if I click on a link that's not safe, it will let me know that immediately, real time. JT, you mentioned earlier something about privacy, and I wanted to hit on that.
Mm-hmm.
Privacy is built in to our mobile threat defense solution. It's privacy by design. We're never going to collect user content or messages. We're just going to examine a site and give you a judgment. You're safe, or this is risky, don't go here. Or like we said earlier, if you have an organizational policy set where you can go there, well, more often than not, people are going to blast through that warning and go where they're not going to go, not intended to go. So in addition to, many people know SentinelOne as an endpoint company, endpoint threat detection and response. So nearly 20 years of Windows Server, so many Mac OS distributions, 13 distributions of Linux OS. But what mobile threat defense does, it extends that behavioral, autonomous, real-time security to iOS endpoints, to Chrome OS, your Chrome tablets for your school districts or whatnot, and also your Android devices. So it's very light on batteries. The first question I had when I installed this, what is it going to do to my battery? I have not perceived a difference at all. I always plug my phone in at night to recharge it, so it's not an issue. The last thing I want to mention here, and it's huge, is that we just announced our integration with the MDM UEM Microsoft Intune. So many global enterprises use Microsoft Intune as their UEM. Well, now SentinelOne integrates there. So it's seamless deployment of the mobile threat defense agent to your endpoints by working with Microsoft Intune there. And in working with Microsoft Intune, when we perceive a threat or recognize a threat, we can send a trigger over to Intune saying, hey, raise the risk level and maybe trigger some response actions for that. JT, you mentioned earlier that beautiful use case about when my phone is at risk, it might be a good time to raise a threat for Rick Bosworth's identity so we can check where his laptop is, how many places and from where is he logged into the enterprise.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Intune has been a large part of when I kind of blending a few of these things together, like what Rick's talking about. When I mentioned that there's a movement away from managed devices, what I meant by that was mobile device management is the scary thing that, it's like you get this thing and it says, your company is using this mobile device management. They can see your email, they can wipe your device, they can, these are all the things. Think about what an MDM was originally designed for. Two very simple use cases. What happens if I fire Rick? How do I make sure that I get all the data off the device? What happens if Monique loses her device again? Notice how I don't have any problems myself. And just these guys, that's what happens when you get to be the one talking, but so that was what it was really designed for, not security. But those scary messages, especially as people are moving, and it was starting and it just accelerated exponentially with the pandemic. Everybody was working from every device and everybody needed access like that. And now everybody's used to having access like that from my device. But I don't want it to be where my company can see everything and can wipe everything. So there's this movement under the whole UEM, Unified Endpoint Management, just like what Rick and SentinelOne is, Unified Endpoint Security, right? But the Unified Endpoint Management, when it came together, there's an MDM, Mobile Device Management, and then there's MAM. There's other pieces as well, but Mobile Application Management. So as Rick was talking about, with Intune, for instance, there's the Intune SDK, which is embedded in all of the major all of the Microsoft products, including Outlook and of course, et cetera. And what are the first apps you give somebody on a mobile device? Access to your email, right? So a variation of what Rick is talking about is if it's a MAM implementation, when you come in on, let's say, a BYOD device, you come in to Outlook, it will say, our company has established a security policy. You need to have Singularity Mobile. Here's a little thing, click and install it on your device to get access to Outlook. Then when you come in, as Rick was talking about, it will assess the risk of your device. But in that case, instead of taking action from a device management standpoint, if Rick is on a bad Wi-Fi, for instance, and his risk level has gone up, it basically says, email is not available at this time until you move to another network. Once you remediate, or if he has malware, right? So, but in that case, it's not managing the device. You don't have all this scary stuff. What it's doing is and here we go again, buzzword bingo, it is actually zero trust. You assess the identity of somebody, you assess the risk posture of the world they're in, and you decide on a fly what to give them access to. So in this case, Rick's on a bad Wi-Fi, you don't get Outlook. And so that's all part of the thing. And because, of course, Microsoft is Microsoft and everybody wants the productivity apps, that's part of what has accelerated this motion away from fully managed to conditional access, zero trust scenarios. And with SentinelOne's ability to be in the middle of that, it's absolutely perfect.
Amen. And, two things. One, I wanted to thank you, Monique and JT, for the opportunity to be with you here today and talk about the importance of mobile threat defense to protecting the enterprise and how it relates to XDR. But two, JT, you began this slide, this part of the conversation with the dad joke. And, I love them, but they're wearing me out, man. You're making me feel knackered.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. But I am a dad. But by the way, at what point did it shift from puns to dad jokes? I mean,
it's all good.
when we were younger,
that I follow are dad jokes.
Now they're dad jokes, but it works. So Monique, do we want to check and see if there's any questions, any thoughts from anybody?
Absolutely. So we wanted to tee this up for any questions we haven't answered. As a reminder, please submit any questions via the question function on the BrightTalk platform. Or, if there's anything else, just reach out to us on our contact form as well, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
And it does not appear that we have any questions. So I would say that we should probably wrap up and give people the rest of their hour. What do you guys think? Or we can sit here and do more dad jokes. If that works.
I think I'm good on the dad jokes. It was a bit much. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. And thank you to Rick and JT for all the dad jokes and the informative information on how MTD and XDR work together.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you guys so much.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye y'all.